Hi, welcome back to the Virtual Elephant YouTube channel. I'm Chris Muchler, Principal Enterprise Architect and VCDX 257. In this video, I'm going to share with you how I am further operationalizing Rancher and leveraging a load balancer in front of all of my Kubernetes clusters. Now, I'm doing this as part of my reference architecture, which shows you how to leverage Rancher as your primary Kubernetes as a service platform. And we want to be able to operationalize and leverage a load balancer for both the API and the apps. So let's jump right in and I'll show you how to do this within your environments. Out of the box, Rancher comes with a reverse proxy. And so when you install many of the applications through the UI, things like Loghorn, Grafana, and Prometheus, you'll see that Rancher by default uses a reverse proxy. Now, I've been looking for a way to further operationalize this and create it in a way that would be able to be leveraged at scale. And that's my big focus. Always, how are you going to be doing this at scale? How are you going to be doing it if you're running hundreds of different Kubernetes clusters across your environment? And so I wanted to be able to front end all of my Kubernetes clusters with their own load balancer. Now, with the example that I'm going to show you here today, I'm actually leveraging a single HAProxy virtual machine appliance that I've created for my dev stage and the prod Kubernetes cluster that we're about to create. Now, if you haven't already checked out my videos on how to leverage Rancher within your environment and deploy a Kubernetes cluster on top of a vSphere environment, I'll link to that video above, as well as the day 2 video that I have on how to leverage things like LDAP and further operationalize Rancher within your environment. And this is really just taking things one step further. So what I've done here, and we're going to switch over to the screen here, and you can see that I have my NSX view up. So again, everything that I'm running in my home lab is built on top of VMware Cloud Foundation and vSphere 8. So I do have NSXT 4.2 installed within my environment that I'm leveraging for all of my overlay networks. So I have two networks here. One, I have this VIPS network, and this network segment is literally just being used for the VIPs that I'm doing any kind of load balancing activities on. So I've created this HAProxy VM that actually has an interface that lives on top of this segment. And then as well as I have this services. So if we look at things from a topology view, and we click here on segments, you can see here services. You can see that I have this Rancher HAProxy virtual machine, and this is the VM that we're going to be doing some of the configuration for to be able to front end the API as well as apps on port 80 and 443 in the future for all of my Kubernetes clusters. And then if we collapse this and now we look at the VIPS segment, you can see that that same virtual machine, Rancher-HAProxy, has an interface that's living on top of that segment as well. Now, this virtual machine is really small. It's a 1 vCPU, 2 gigabytes of memory, and then like a 75 gigabyte disk. And that's really all that I need for load balancing within my environment. Your mileage may vary depending on the number of clusters that you're deploying and the amount of throughput going through them. And certainly you can play with HAProxy very easily to be able to configure it for your needs. So like I said, I have another video where I actually show you in detail how to go ahead and create a cluster using Rancher on top of a vSphere environment. We're going to breeze through that a little bit faster in this video because it's not the focus of this video. I really want to show you what you need to do initially to enable the ability to have a load balancer in front of Rancher, but then other than that, we're just going to kind of screen through this. So you can see here, I already have a dev and a stage cluster. We're going to go ahead and create a prod cluster now. So we'll click vSphere. We're going to give it the name of prod. I always call my controllers CNTRL. We're going to increase that to 3. Worker, leave that be. Select the folder that I want this to live in. 4 VP CPUs. And then for the cloud config, I actually have this saved. And so I'm going to bring this in from my saved file. So this is my cloud config file. It has my custom cert, wildcard cert that I've created. It ties things into the cluster so that it can pull images from my Harbor repo. as well as doing some things for eBPF, as well as installing certain packages that I like to make sure, and then setting up the user. We'll quickly select the network, which is going to be VZ1AZ prod. And now we'll go ahead and click on the plus sign real quick to create the workers. I'm going to create 3 of these, 8 vCPUs in 8192 because I have all 3 clusters matching. I'm using the same Noble server cloud image that I was using before, so all of my clusters have the same thing. We'll copy in this cloud config file, and then because I run Longhorn, we're going to add in a larger disk so that we can do persistent volumes on top of these nodes. Select the network, come down here, we're going to do Cilium for the CNI. So we're not going to change anything else here other than selecting Cilium as our container network. And then we're going to switch views and we're going to go edit as YAML. We're going to click save and continue so that it saves all of the things that we've done into this YAML. Now we're looking for a very specific section called the machine global config under RKE config. So here it is, machine global config around line 322. Okay, now what we need to do is we need to make sure that the certificate that gets created by Rancher has the VIP that we're going to be using for HAProxy so that it sees it as a valid endpoint for the cluster, so that when we send commands and we use things like Kubecontrol, we'll be able to actually interact with the cluster. So what we're going to do is edit this. It's just 2 lines, TLS SAN, and then we're going to add in the VIP of the load balancer that we're going to be leveraging. And now I've created this on 10.5.1.17. Okay, and then once we've done that, we can go back to the form if there's other things you want to edit, or we can go ahead and click on create. Now at this point, I'm ready to go ahead. So we're just going to click create, and we're going to let this actually start running in the background, and it's going to provision our prod cluster inside of our vSphere environment. So we're going to go ahead and let this run. I'm going to just skip this in the video itself, and we're going to just pick right up once the cluster has created. And then I'll show you the few other things that we need to do to be able to allow ourselves to leverage HAProxy for the API in front of the Rancher cluster. Okay, so after about 16 minutes, you can see here on the screen that the new prod cluster is running. So right now on the screen, you can see that I've got these 3 controllers and I've got these 3 worker nodes. And so what we want to do is we're going to create the initial entries inside of the HAProxy config file within our environment for this new cluster. Now, if you go to Project Signal Wave, you will see that there is an HAProxy folder. There's actually a Python script in there that will dynamically create the HAProxy config file for you, but I'm going to show you how to do all of the manual steps here on the screen and in this video. So let me go ahead and make the font a little bit larger. So what we want to do is we want to edit our HAProxy config for this new cluster. So you can see here in the file that I already have entries for that dev and that stage cluster. And so what we're going to do is we're going to just copy and paste this last entry, and then we'll edit it for our prod cluster. Okay, so 10.5.5.181, 10.5.5.179, 10.5.5.114. Those are our 3 IP addresses for our controllers. So we will save, and then we will do a sudo systemctl reload HAProxy, and then we'll check the status. All right, so our HAProxy server is now servicing traffic on port 6443 for our new prod cluster. So the first thing that we need to do is we want to validate that that VIP that we specified in the YAML information when we created the cluster actually made it into the cert. So what we're going to do is this command is in the README file on that HAProxy folder in my Project Signal Wave. So you can copy this. it's going to use an OpenSSL connection and look for those subject alternative names. And what we are looking for, and we are looking for 10.5.117 IP address, 10.5.117. It kind of wrapped here around the screen. So we have our IP address that is now part of the certificate that we need for the Kubernetes cluster for this new prod cluster that we've created using Rancher. So the next thing that we need to do is actually make sure that our kubeconfig file, now I'm doing this on my the HAProxy VM itself, because again, I have this script that's actually being run through cron to detect changes if those controllers get new virtual machines, which subsequently would have new IP addresses, so that I can detect changes within a minute of the environments. So what we're going to do here is go to the kube directory, and then I have a kubeconfig file. Now this file is set up to use the Rancher reverse proxy. So you see here for the stage cluster, and then you see here for the dev cluster. So we're going to add in to this kubeconfig file the settings for this new prod cluster that we've created. And we're going to do this because we need to create an HAProxy user and assign a cluster admin role binding to that user, and then create a token for the user to be able to authenticate. So we're going to come over here, and we're going to copy the kubeconfig file to the clipboard, and then we're going to come back to our thing. This is going to look a little messy. You could do this any number of ways. We're just going to paste it here into the bottom. All right, and then we're going to take, and we're going to remove this one, this one, this one. I'm going to copy for the prod cluster and paste it in here. And then we'll delete this entry. And then we're going to copy the prod user token. Paste it up there where it belongs. And we'll do this real easy. So we'll just have it set so that the context is prod, and then we'll check it. So here are our prod nodes that we see within our environment. So this is perfect. So what we're going to do next is we're going to create a service account called HAProxy user, and then we're going to create a cluster role binding, and then we're going to create a new token. And we're going to use that token inside of this kubeconfig file that we're going to create that will then point to the HAProxy VIP on port 6443 for communicating with this new prod cluster. So what I've been doing is I have a folder called HAProxy. I have a number of things in here. This is where that Python script is actually today for converting the kubeconfig file, as well as actually generating the new HAProxy config. Okay, and you can get those from the project SignalWave GitHub repo. But what we're going to do is run kubectl create service account HAProxy user, and then in the kube system namespace. And now we're going to kubectl create cluster role binding HAProxy user binding, and then we're going to do cluster role equals cluster admin, and then service account is equal to kube admin namespace HAProxy user. Oh, I missed an R. 2 R's. Cluster role binding. There we are. So now we're going to create the token. Namespace is kube system create token, and then it's going to be HAProxy user. Oops. So this is the token. So you're going to want to copy this token. All right. And then we are going to create a new file called, and what we're going to do is the example is in the README file for HAProxy, or you can use, I don't have a script for this, but what we're going to do is we're just going to CP this stage kubeconfig YAML, and we're going to create a new one called prod kubeconfig YAML, and then we'll vim that prod kubeconfig. So this is the token for the other user. Now we're going to add the new token that we just created for this one. The cluster name is prod. It's on VIP 10.5 1.17. And then the last thing we're going to do, and I'll show you this in just a moment, is how to get the CA cert out of the cluster so that we can add it into this cert file. So now the next thing that we need to do is we need to get the intermediate certificate authority that Rancher has created for the cluster. So we need to actually go ahead and look at the certificate chain. So we're going to come over here. We're going to run this OpenSSL S client, point it to your VIP, okay, and then do show certs. And you're going to get a bunch of output. And what you're looking for here is this secondary certificate. So not this first one, okay, not this Kube API server one. We're looking for the one that's been signed by the RKE2 server. All right, and all we need here is this begin certificate to the end certificate section. This, you're going to copy this, and then you're going to create a file, okay, called prod. In my case, I do it by the name of the cluster, prod cluster CACRT. And then you're going to put this inside of that file. Now we've already linked this CRT file into that kubeconfig YAML file that we created. So if I look at prod kubeconfig YAML, you can see here I told it the certificate authority is in that prod cluster CA cert file that we created just a moment ago. All right, so now that we've created that cert file and we have the prod kubeconfig file, we can actually go ahead and now use that kubeconfig file to be able to interact with the cluster. So if we do a kubectl kubeconfig and then the name of the file and then a get nodes, we can now see that we are attached to that prod cluster using the HAProxy load balancer that we've set up. So we can do things like get nodes, get pods -a. We can see everything that's running within the environment. Now, the important thing is that this also doesn't prevent us from using the actual Rancher UI still, because again, this will still use that reverse proxy. So if we come over here, we go to cluster and click on cluster tools and we want to install Longhorn, we can still do this. So we're ahead install. And this will now, Rancher will continue to use its reverse proxy that's running off of the Docker VM. Now, this is an important step towards operationalizing Rancher further within your environments as your primary Kubernetes as a service platform offering. And it's becoming a key part of the reference architecture, I feel, because it's going to add additional resiliency and robustness to your service offering that you're creating, because you don't want all of your users having to come through that reverse proxy that Rancher is running within your environment. Now you can give each dev team or each environment, like I've done it where I have a dev, a stage, and a prod cluster, you can give them their own dedicated load balancer with its own dedicated VIP. Or you could do like I'm doing, you can have a single load balancing appliance running HAProxy, and you can have an individual VIP for each one of those clusters. And then you can further isolate the types of traffic by having a VIP for the API and a VIP for the apps, which is what we're doing here. And so the next step, and the thing that the script does for you automatically, is within that same HAProxy VM, it's actually going out and creating those port 80 and port 443 options within the HAProxy config to be able to forward that apps traffic on a secondary VIP as well. And so again, this is just allowing you to have further resiliency built into your environment. So we can see here that Longhorn finished. So now we can come down here to Longhorn, and this is going to, again, you can see it here in the URL title. It's using the reverse proxy to be able to redirect you for that prod cluster onto Longhorn that you've installed. And again, this just lets you do all of the things that we want to be able to do, like installing monitoring. Okay, we can customize this now. Go over to Prometheus, say we're going to use persistent storage. We're going to do it on Longhorn on our cluster. And come up here for Grafana before going on, using a PVC template. Read write once. Go ahead and hit next. And now we're leveraging Longhorn alongside of Prometheus and Grafana in our prod cluster, just like I am in my dev and stage clusters. They're leveraging, when I go through the UI here, the Docker reverse proxy, but otherwise, when I deliver these clusters out to the end users, I'm going to be giving them that HAProxy VIP that I've created for the API and the VIP that I've created for the apps to use. If you're enjoying this content, please make sure that you subscribe to the Virtual Elephant YouTube channel, that you turn on notifications, and you smash that like button. As always, feel free to continue the conversation by leaving me a comment below and let me know what you're doing with Rancher within your environments and how you're leveraging it as your primary Kubernetes platform offering. And if you're struggling with Rancher or Kubernetes in general, please reach out to me on X at Chris Mutchler, and let's figure out how I can help you be successful in the Kubernetes space. And I look forward to talking to you next time.